morning air was crisp, tinged with the faint scent of dew and the lingering warmth of dawn. The four friends Michael, Sarah, Thomas, and Emily stood at the edge of a small, sleepy village in southern England, their breaths visible in the cold light of early autumn. Each of them carried a modest leather satchel filled with essentials, maps, notebooks, a few trinkets, and the unwavering anticipation of adventure. The village behind them was silent except for the occasional crowing of a rooster or the distant clang of a blacksmith at work. It seemed almost untouched by the modern age, the cobbled streets glistening with the remnants of last night's rain, reflecting the golden sun as it slowly climbed the sky. Michael, the de facto leader of the group, adjusted his scarf and squinted down the narrow road ahead. "It's hard to believe we're finally here," he said, his voice low but eager. His eyes gleamed with the same curiosity that had driven him to spend months researching every possible landmark in medieval England. All those books, all those maps. And now we actually get to walk where knights and merchants once walked. Sarah laughed, her breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. "You sound like a tour guide, Michael. I expected you to bring a pointer stick too." She tightened her gloves and adjusted the straps of her satchel. Her eyes were fixed on a faint silhouette of a castle perched on a distant hill, its towers piercing the horizon like silent sentinels from another time. Thomas, who had always been the practical one, shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clearly eager to get moving. "I just hope this castle is open," he said, squinting through a pair of binoculars he had strapped around his neck. "I don't want to be stuck reading plaques for the next hour. We should see something real: battlements, courtyards, maybe even dungeons. Something that actually makes you feel like you've stepped back in time." Emily, ever the dreamer, smiled quietly to herself. Her eyes wandered over the rolling hills blanketed with morning mist, over fields that seemed to stretch endlessly, dotted with grazing sheep. "It's not just the castles or the stone walls," she said softly. "It's the way the land itself has stories. You can almost feel the footsteps of everyone who's ever walked here before us. The farmers, the merchants, the knights, even the peasants. They all left something behind in this air." Michael nodded, appreciating Emily's perspective. "You're right," he said. "And that's why we need to take our time. We're not just here to tick off landmarks. We're here to experience it, to understand it, to feel like part of that history, even for a day." The group began walking along the narrow road that wound its way through the village and into the open countryside. The path was lined with ancient oaks and elms, their leaves turning shades of amber and crimson, rustling softly as the wind whispered through them. Every now and then, a small stone wall would appear, marking the boundaries of farms that had probably existed for centuries. The friends passed a few villagers who nodded politely, some still in the early routines of milking cows or gathering firewood, their lives seemingly unchanged by the centuries that had passed. As they walked, Michael pulled out the map he had been studying for weeks. "According to this," he said, tracing a route with his finger, "we'll reach the ruins of St. Aldwyn's Abbey by midday. The guidebooks say it's one of the best preserved ruins in this part of England. And from there, we can make our way to Wessex Forest by late afternoon. There's supposed to be a hidden trail that leads to a medieval watchtower." Sarah tilted her head, examining the map, Hidden trails always sound more dangerous than they are, she said, raising an eyebrow. Or at least more inconvenient. I'm guessing it'll be muddy and full of thorns. Thomas groaned. There you go, always thinking about the mud and thorns. I want to see adventure, not get stuck in a bush. Emily laughed, lightly tapping him on the arm. Don't worry, Thomas. That's part of the fun. Remember, we didn't come all this way just for convenience. The morning passed in a rhythm of crunching leaves underfoot, occasional laughter, and bursts of conversation about medieval life. Michael pointed out a cluster of stone cottages that had clearly been standing for hundreds of years. Imagine living here, he mused. No electricity, no phones, just the land, your neighbors, and the stories passed down through generations. Sarah shivered, both from the cold and the thought. It sounds romantic until you remember what that meant for the average person. I'd rather not spend a week in medieval England without modern plumbing, Thomas snorted. Modern plumbing aside, the craftsmanship here is incredible. Look at those stone walls. They've lasted longer than some of our modern buildings. And that archway over there? That's not just stone. That's history standing tall. It's like touching the past. Emily, ever observant, paused near a stream that trickled alongside the path. She bent down and ran her fingers through the icy water. It's not just the stones, she said. It's the rivers, the forests, the very land. Everything here has a texture, a sound, a smell that tells a story. The bays and castles are impressive, but the land itself, it remembers. By late morning, they reached the base of a small hill where the ruins of St. Aldwyn's Abbey began to emerge from the mist. The abbey had once been a grand structure, its spires reaching towards the sky. But now it was a skeleton of its former glory. Crumbled walls, weathered carvings, and moss-covered stones told tales of centuries of wind, rain, and neglect. Michael led the way, his hand brushing against the cool, rough stone. Look at these carvings, he said, crouching to inspect a partially preserved relief of an angel. Even centuries later, someone's effort and artistry remain. Imagine the monks who lived here, spending hours in prayer, study, and work. Every stone has a story. Sarah wandered through the courtyard, marveling at the arches and the play of light through broken windows. It's beautiful, she whispered, and tragic. Beautiful because of the skill and vision. Tragic because of what's been lost. Thomas, not content with simply observing, began exploring the crumbling passageways, peering into small chambers that might have been sleeping quarters or storage rooms. This is exactly why I wanted to come, he said, his voice echoing slightly. This is real history. You can almost hear the echoes of the past if you listen closely. Emily joined him, crouching to examine a faint inscription on a wall. This looks like it was carved hundreds of years ago, she said, tracing the letters with her fingers. Some of these inscriptions, they're personal. People wanted to leave their mark, their name, their existence. It's like a whisper across time. The group spent hours wandering the ruins, taking notes, snapping photographs, and letting their imaginations run wild. They speculated about the lives of the monks, about the political intrigues that might have surrounded the abbey, and about the everyday struggles and joys of people who had lived in the village below centuries ago. By noon, the sun had climbed high, casting a warm glow over the abbey and the surrounding fields. The friends found a small patch of grass overlooking the ruins and decided to rest. They unpacked a modest lunch of bread, cheese, and fruit, eating slowly as they absorbed the serenity of the place. Michael leaned back, his eyes scanning the horizon. "I feel like this is what traveling should be," he said quietly, not rushing through, not checking off boxes, but actually being present, feeling what it must have felt like. Even for a moment, Sarah nodded, chewing on a piece of bread. "It's funny," she said. "We came here expecting ruins and history, but I think we're learning more about patience and observation than anything else." Thomas wiped his hands and stretched. "Well, I'll agree to that. As long as we eventually find that watchtower, I want to see the land from above, to feel like we're really part of this world." Emily smiled, closing her eyes briefly. "And when we do, we'll remember this moment too. Sitting here, surrounded by centuries of history, sharing it with friends. That's part of the story as well." The four of them sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, letting the gentle wind carry the distant sounds of the countryside. Birds called from the trees, and somewhere in the village below, a bell tolled lazily. For a moment, the modern world felt very far away, and they were simply travelers in a land that had witnessed countless stories before them. Eventually, Michael stood, brushing the grass from his trousers. "All right," he said, determination returning to his voice. "St. Aldwyn's has given us its secrets. Now it's time to find Wessex Forest and that watchtower. We've still got a day full of history ahead of us." The group gathered their belongings and resumed their journey, walking along a narrow trail that led away from the abbey and into the gently rolling hills. The path became rougher, lined with brambles and roots that challenged their footing. Michael led carefully, pointing out old boundary stones and remnants of medieval farming implements half buried in the soil. Sarah groaned as she stepped over a particularly muddy patch. "I knew it. Thorns, mud, uneven ground. Exactly as I predicted." Thomas laughed, slipping slightly, but catching himself on a nearby tree. "See, this is exactly why it's worth it. Every step makes the destination feel earned." Emily walked slowly, taking in the surroundings. "Look at that," she said, pointing to a small clearing where sunlight filtered through the branches, illuminating a carpet of fallen leaves. "It's like nature itself is showing us a secret. Centuries ago, someone might have walked through this exact spot, not knowing we'd be here now, following in their footsteps." As they continued, the trail began to ascend gradually, leading them higher into the hills. From this vantage point, the countryside stretched endlessly. Patchwork fields, winding streams, clusters of cottages, and distant ruins barely visible against the horizon. The air was cooler here, scented with pine and damp earth. Michael paused, pulling out his binoculars. "I think I can see the watchtower from here," he said, pointing toward a distant silhouette partially hidden by trees. "It's small, but it's definitely there. If we keep moving at this pace, we should reach it by late afternoon." The friends exchanged excited glances, their fatigue momentarily forgotten. The idea of discovering a hidden piece of medieval history was thrilling, each step bringing them closer to something tangible, something that had endured long past the people who had built it. As they walked on, The conversation drifted naturally from practical observations to speculative history. They discussed medieval trade routes, the roles of knights and peasants, the influence of monasteries on local life, and even the mundane details of how people lived day to day. Each topic sparked curiosity, debate, and laughter, weaving their own story into the tapestry of the land they traversed. Hours passed, the sun gradually descending, casting long shadows across the hills. By late afternoon, the forest thickened, the path narrowing further. The sounds of the countryside became muted under the dense canopy, replaced by the rustle of leaves and occasional bird calls. A sense of quiet reverence enveloped the friends, as if the forest itself acknowledged the centuries of history contained within its bounds. Thomas was the first to spot the watchtower, peeking through the trees like a sentinel waiting for their arrival. "There it is," he whispered, almost reverently. "It's even more impressive than I imagined." Michael led the way carefully, navigating the uneven terrain until they reached a small clearing. There it stood, a stone tower, weathered and covered in creeping ivy, but proud and commanding nonetheless. The structure had clearly been maintained, at least partially, though the signs of age were evident in the cracks of the masonry and the moss that clung to its base. Emily circled the tower, her fingers brushing against the cold stone. "It's incredible," she murmured, "to think that this has stood here for centuries, watching over this land. It's humbling." Sarah leaned against the tower's wall, feeling the texture of the stone under her palm. "I can almost imagine guards climbing up these steps, looking out over the forest, keeping watch. Every decision they made up here, it mattered for people's lives below." Michael smiled, already envisioning the exploration ahead. "Let's see what secrets it holds," he said, motioning toward the entrance. The friends entered carefully, their footsteps echoing softly in the hollow interior. The spiral staircase led them upwards, each step groaning under their weight, carrying them closer to the top where the view promised to be breathtaking. Reaching the summit, they stepped out onto the platform, the wind whipping around them. Below, the forest stretched endlessly, dotted with the occasional village or field. The winding path they had traversed visible only as a faint trace through the greenery. The sun, now nearing the horizon, painted the sky in shades of gold, orange, and deepening purple. For a long moment, they simply stood, taking in the view, absorbing the sense of history, continuity, and connection. The tower had become more than just a destination. It was a vantage point not only of the land, but of time itself, a place where past and present converged. Michael broke the silence finally, his voice soft with awe. This is why we travel, not just to see, but to feel, to stand where others have stood, and to realize we are part of something much larger than ourselves." Sarah nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon, and to remember that even centuries later, stories survive, in stones, in trees, in the wind, waiting for people like us to find them. Thomas grinned, looking down at the winding path they had taken, and to have a little adventure along the way. Emily laughed softly. Yes, that too. The friends lingered atop the tower until the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky turning a deep, indigo blue dotted with the first stars of evening. As they descended the staircase, the weight of the day's experiences settled over them not as exhaustion, but as a quiet satisfaction, a sense of fulfillment that only comes from truly engaging with the world and its history. By the time they reached the forest floor, the twilight had deepened, and the first fireflies began to flicker in the undergrowth. They followed the trail back toward their lodgings, the distant village lights twinkling like tiny sentinels guiding them home. Conversation was subdued, each friend lost in their thoughts, savoring the richness of the day and the stories they had gathered along the way. Michael glanced at his companions, a contented smile on his face. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we continue. There's more to see, more history to uncover, and more stories waiting for us in every stone and stream. But tonight we remember today." Sarah, Thomas, and Emily nodded, each understanding the unspoken bond formed through shared exploration. The forest seemed to embrace them as they walked, the whispers of the past mingling with their footsteps, carrying their own small story forward into the night. And so, the four friends made their way through the twilight, their hearts full, their minds alive with history, and their spirits ready for whatever adventures awaited in the days to come. The first light of morning spilled over the horizon, painting the English countryside in pale gold and soft lavender hues. The four friends Michael, Sarah, Thomas, and Emily emerged from the cozy inn where they had spent the night, stretching and shaking off the remnants of sleep. A gentle mist clung to the fields, curling around the roots of ancient oaks and drifting lazily through hedgerows. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and wildflowers, a scent that seemed both fresh and timeless. Michael checked the map once more, his fingers tracing the winding trail that led deeper into Wessex Forest. "Yesterday was incredible," he said, his voice carrying a mix of excitement and determination. "But today, the trail is supposed to be more challenging." The guidebook mentions hidden ruins and a small chapel tucked away, near the northern edge of the forest. If we're lucky, we might even stumble upon a forgotten burial mound. Sarah tightened her scarf and adjusted her satchel. "I love ruins," she said, her eyes sparkling. "But you keep saying if we're lucky. Do you mean to imply we might get lost?" Thomas smirked, hefting his backpack. "Lost in a forest this old and dense? That's half the fun." Besides, Michael brought the map and Emily brought, well, her keen sense of direction. "I hope," Emily chuckled, slinging her satchel over one shoulder. "I'll do my best. But let's agree if we do get lost, we won't panic. We'll just pretend we're medieval explorers charting unknown lands." The friends laughed, stepping onto the narrow trail that led into the forest. Immediately, the atmosphere changed. The sunlight filtering through the trees created dancing patterns on the ground, and the air grew cooler, carrying the soft rustle of leaves and the distant calls of birds. Every now and then, a deer would peek from behind a tree, startled by their presence. Before bounding gracefully deeper into the woods, Michael led confidently, pointing out faint markers carved into tree trunks. These old markers were probably used by travelers centuries ago, he explained. Sometimes they guided pilgrims, sometimes hunters, and sometimes merchants moving between villages. It's amazing to think we're following the exact paths people walked hundreds of years ago. Sarah crouched to examine a cluster of mushrooms at the base of an oak. "I love how everything feels alive here," she said softly. "Even the smallest plants seem ancient, like they've been growing under these trees long before anyone thought to write down history." Thomas paused at a narrow stream, kneeling to dip his hands into the cold, clear water. "This is perfect," he said. "No pollution, no noise, just nature." Imagine how different this would have been in the Middle Ages, just the forest, the water, and people relying entirely on it for survival. Emily leaned against a tree, observing the subtle changes in the forest floor, the way moss clung to stones, how sunlight created patches of warmth in the otherwise shaded trail. "It's like walking through a living museum," she said. "Every detail, every stone, every leaf has a story, and it's all connected to the people who walked here before us." The morning passed with the rhythmic crunch of leaves underfoot and occasional bursts of conversation. Michael pointed out an old stone bridge barely visible under thick vines. "This bridge likely dates back to the 14th century, he said. "Can you imagine carts crossing this, carrying wool, grain, and goods from nearby villages?" Sarah stepped carefully over the mossy stones. "I can imagine it," she said. "And I can imagine people slipping into the stream when the moss got wet. Probably a lot more exciting back then than it seems now." Thomas laughed. "Hopping lightly from stone to stone. History always seems dangerous when you imagine it firsthand." Emily followed him, marveling at the craftsmanship. "Even now, you can see the precision in the stones," she said. "No mortar here in some sections, yet it still holds. It's like the builders infused it with their knowledge and care, and it's lasted centuries." By midday, the forest opened into a sunlit glade, revealing the small chapel that had been mentioned in the guidebook. The structure was modest, but charming, with ivy crawling up the stone walls and a wooden door that creaked with age. The roof had patches of moss and lichen, and the small bell tower tilted slightly. Yet, it seemed full of character and history. Michael approached the door cautiously, brushing away cobwebs. "This chapel must have been a spiritual hub for the local community," he said. "Even though it's small, think of the prayers, the ceremonies, and the gatherings that took place here. Every corner holds a memory." Sarah stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. Sunlight streamed through narrow, stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the worn stone floor. "It's peaceful," she whispered. "You can feel the weight of centuries, but not in a heavy way. It's more like a quiet reverence, a gentle reminder of lives lived." Thomas wandered to the back of the chapel, examining faded inscriptions on the stone walls. "Some of these markings look like names or dates," he said. "It's incredible to think someone carved these hundreds of years ago, maybe hoping to be remembered." Emily knelt near a small, ornate altar, running her fingers over the carved symbols. "They did it so delicately," she said softly. "Even with simple tools, they created something lasting, something meant to connect with people across time." After exploring the chapel, the friends stepped back into the glade, where the sun warmed their faces. Michael spread the map on a nearby rock. "Our next destination is an old burial mound not far from here," he said. "It's partly hidden by trees, but it's supposed to be well preserved. Archaeologists have found artifacts there that date back to the medieval period. If we're careful, we can see traces of history almost untouched by modern eyes." Sarah adjusted her gloves, peering into the dense trees ahead. "This forest keeps secrets well," she said. "I can barely see the path, but I love that. It makes the journey feel like a real discovery." Thomas grinned, stepping forward. "Exactly. The harder it is to find, the more thrilling it becomes. I want to see what's hidden, Emily followed closely, humming softly as they navigated the undergrowth. Twisting vines and gnarled roots challenged their footing, and occasional thorns tugged at their clothing. Despite the obstacles, they moved carefully, guided by Michael's map and Emily's sense of direction. After a while, the trees began to thin, revealing a mound covered in soft grass and dotted with wildflowers. The mound was low, almost blending with the landscape, but its presence was unmistakable, a silent sentinel of centuries past. Michael approached the mound reverently. "This is remarkable," he said. "Even with all the changes round it, the mound remains. People built it to honor the dead, and now it's become a marker of history for us to discover." Sarah circled the mound, observing small stones that might have marked graves or ceremonial boundaries. "It's humbling," she said. "These were people's lives, their stories, and yet time has carried them forward, letting us glimpse a piece of their world." Thomas crouched to examine a cluster of stones near the base. "Look at these carvings," he said. "Even centuries later, you can tell someone cared enough to leave a mark, to remember someone." Emily stood quietly, hands clasped behind her back. "I think that's why we're here," she said softly. "To connect with that care, to feel a little of what they felt, and to carry their memory forward in our own way." The friends spent the next hour exploring the mound, taking careful notes, photographing details, and imagining the lives of those who had been buried there. Each observation sparked discussion: the customs of medieval burials, the symbolism of certain carvings, the possible roles of the people who had been laid to rest beneath the earth. As the sun climbed higher, the forest around them seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging their presence and their curiosity. Birds sang overhead, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, adding a soundtrack of serenity to their exploration. Eventually, Michael consulted the map again. "The forest trail continues toward the eastern ridge," he said. "From there, we'll have a vantage point to see the surrounding countryside. It's supposed to be stunning at this time of day." Sarah stretched, brushing dirt from her trousers. "Let's keep moving," she said. "I want to see that view before the light fades." The friends resumed their journey, moving carefully over uneven ground. The forest seemed to shift around them. Sudden clearings, thick groves, and hidden streams created a sense of mystery and anticipation. Every step felt like uncovering a layer of history, every rustle of leaves a whisper from the past. By mid-afternoon, they reached the eastern ridge. The view was breathtaking. Rolling hills bathed in sunlight, distant villages nestled among patchwork fields, and forests stretching as far as the eye could see. The path they had taken wound like a ribbon through the landscape, connecting the abbey, the chapel, and the burial mound into a coherent tapestry of exploration. Michael leaned against a rock, binoculars in hand. "This is what we came for," he said. "Not just the landmarks, but the way they fit together, the story they tell about people, place, and time." Sarah knelt beside him, sketching in her notebook. "I can't stop thinking about the lives behind each ruin," she said. "It's overwhelming, in a good way." Thomas wandered to the edge, looking down over a forested valley. "And to think, centuries ago, people walked these same ridges, looking out over their lands, making decisions that shaped communities. It's like standing on the edge of history." Emily closed her eyes, letting the breeze wash over her. "I feel connected," she whispered, "not just to this land, but to everyone who came before us, to every story, every life that has passed through here. And now, our story is part of it too." As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, the friends lingered, savoring the panorama and the quiet sense of accomplishment. The forest, the ruins, the chapel, and the mound had all offered glimpses of a medieval world, each encounter deepening their understanding and appreciation for the passage of time. Eventually, they began their descent, the long shadows stretching across the path, guiding them back toward the inn. Conversation was softer now, reflective and filled with shared memories. Every discovery, every observation, every imagined story of the past had woven itself into a tapestry of experience that they would carry with them long after the journey ended. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, night had begun to settle, and the first stars twinkled above. The distant lights of the village welcomed them back, a reminder that though history was all around them, the present waited patiently to be rejoined. Michael smiled, glancing at his companions. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we head toward the old market town. There's a medieval festival reconstruction, complete with crafts, food, and performances. We'll get to see history in action, not just in ruins." Sarah nodded, a quiet excitement lighting her face. "I can't wait," she said. "It'll be like stepping fully into the past, not just observing it from a distance." Thomas grinned. "And I hope they have some archery demonstrations. I want to try my hand at medieval skills." Emily laughed, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "And I'll be there, taking notes, sketching, and soaking it all in. Every detail matters." The four friends walked the final stretch toward the inn, the night wrapping around them like a comforting cloak. Their hearts were full of the day's experiences, their minds alive with stories of abbeys, chapels, burial mounds, and forest trails. And though the day had ended, they knew that the adventure of discovery was far from over. The morning air was cool but invigorating, carrying with it the faint scent of baked bread, wood smoke, and the faint tang of livestock from nearby fields. The four friends Michael, Sarah, Thomas, and Emily emerged from the inn, their satchels packed, notebooks ready, and cameras slung over shoulders. Today's destination was an old market town, famed for its medieval festival reconstruction. The promise of music, crafts, food, and living history filled them with anticipation. Michael adjusted his scarf and looked at the winding road ahead. The guidebook says the festival starts mid-morning, but arriving early will give us the chance to explore the town itself, he said. Some of these streets date back to the 12th century, and the shops and taverns are built on foundations older than that. Sarah laughed. "You're always thinking ahead, but I guess that's good. I want to see everything before the crowds arrive." Thomas hoisted his backpack and smirked. "And I want to test my medieval skills, archery, sword fighting demonstrations, anything they let the public try. I feel like a kid in a castle playground." Emily grinned. "And I'll be sketching, writing, observing. I want to capture not just the sights, but the atmosphere, the way the festival smells, sounds, and feels. That's history too." As they entered the outskirts of the town, narrow cobblestone streets twisted between timber-framed houses. Many of the buildings leaned slightly, as if telling the stories of centuries spent braving wind, rain, and time itself. Window boxes overflowed with flowers, and the faint clatter of blacksmiths working in forges could be heard from open shops. Market stalls began to appear, covered in brightly colored fabrics, their goods ranging from handmade pottery and carved wooden toys to delicate jewelry and leather goods. Michael stopped to point at a plaque embedded in the wall of a building. "Look at this," he said, tracing the inscription with his finger. "It marks the town's founding in the early 1200s. Imagine living here then, every day bustling with merchants, travelers, and townsfolk. Life was probably harder, but I bet the community was close-knit." Sarah stepped closer to a stall selling hand-woven textiles. "I love the colors," she said, "and knowing they're made with techniques unchanged for centuries. It's like touching history in a very real way." Thomas wandered to a weapons demonstration area, where a group of performers practiced swordplay. The clang of steel on steel echoed through the courtyard. He couldn't resist stepping closer. "I need to try that," he muttered, eyes gleaming. "There's just something thrilling about watching history in motion." Emily strolled along the streets, notebook in hand, sketching the timbered houses, the market stalls, and the people moving between them. "It's also immersive," she murmured. "Even the smells, the bread baking, the herbs, the wood smoke, they transport you to another era." By mid-morning, the festival was in full swing. Minstrels played lutes and flutes, filling the streets with music that sounded centuries old. Children ran between stalls, laughing, some dressed in tiny tunics and dresses reminiscent of the medieval period. Artisans demonstrated pottery, weaving, and blacksmithing, inviting curious visitors to try their hand at the crafts. Michael guided the group toward an archery demonstration. "I think this is your chance, Thomas," he said with a grin. "Step right up." Thomas eagerly joined the line, drawing the bow and taking aim at a wooden target. With each arrow, he became more focused, his excitement blending with concentration. The instructor offered tips on stance and release, explaining how medieval archers relied not only on skill, but also on intuition honed over years of practice. After several attempts, Thomas hit the target repeatedly, his face lighting up with pride. Sarah wandered nearby, sampling honey cakes and listening to the minstrels. She paused to watch a group of performers reenacting a medieval market scene, complete with jesters, merchants, and townsfolk bartering over goods. "It's fascinating," she said to Emily. "They make it feel alive, not just a staged performance. You can imagine people living this way every day." Emily nodded, sketching quickly. "Exactly. This is living history, and being here, seeing it through all senses, is different from reading about it in books. You can almost feel what life was like, its rhythm, its vibrancy, its simplicity and complexity all at once." Michael led the group to a small, open courtyard where a mock joust was taking place. Horses pranced, knights in armor raised lances, and spectators cheered from wooden stands. "This was one of the highlights," Michael said, raising his voice over the cheering crowd. "Jousting wasn't just a sport, it was a demonstration of skill, strategy, and status. It was serious business." The friends found a spot to watch, and even though the knights were performing for an audience, it was easy to imagine the intensity of real competitions. The horses thundered across the field, the lances clashed with resounding impact, and the crowd erupted with excitement each time a knight was unseated. After the joust, they explored more of the festival. Michael stopped at a demonstration of medieval cooking, watching a chef prepare a stew over an open fire. The aroma was rich and hearty, mingling with the scent of freshly baked bread from a nearby stall. Sarah sampled the food eagerly, savoring flavors that felt both familiar and exotic. A taste of a culinary world long past yet surprisingly accessible. Thomas tried his hand at a small wooden catapult, launching clay balls toward a target under the guidance of a festival volunteer. He laughed loudly as one projectile flew farther than expected, narrowly missing another visitor. "This is exactly why I love history," he shouted. "You get to touch it, feel it, interact with it." Emily wandered toward a quiet corner of the festival, where a local historian demonstrated calligraphy. She watched carefully as the instructor guided a brush across parchment, forming letters with precision and artistry. "Even the writing tells a story," she murmured. "Every stroke, every flourish. It connects you to a time when literacy was precious and art was woven into daily life." By early afternoon, the group reconvened near a shaded fountain at the center of town. They were tired but exhilarated, the sounds, smells, and sights of the festival lingering in their minds. Michael consulted the map once more. "After lunch, we can explore the old town walls," he said. "They're some of the best preserved in England and will give us a vantage point over the entire festival and surrounding countryside." Sarah stretched, her arms reaching toward the sky. "Perfect. I want to see it all from above. The perspective will give a whole new understanding of the town's layout." Thomas nodded enthusiastically. "And maybe we'll find hidden corners, secret alleys, or old gates that most visitors never notice. That's where real history hides." Emily closed her notebook, smiling. "Every day adds another layer to our journey. We're seeing history in ruins, in forests, and now in living festivals. It's incredible how diverse these experiences are. Yet they all connect back to the same past." The friends had a light lunch of bread, cheese, and fresh fruit, sitting on a low stone wall overlooking a bustling square. They shared observations, speculated about medieval life, and laughed at the antics of festival performers. For a moment, they were not just visitors, they were participants in a centuries-old tradition, experiencing the ebb and flow of community, celebration, and daily life in medieval England. After resting, they made their way toward the town walls, climbing narrow stone steps to reach the parapets. From this height, the festival below looked like a miniature medieval world, vibrant and alive. Roofs of timber-framed houses, market stalls, and winding streets formed a mosaic of color and texture, interspersed with open courtyards and the occasional fountain. The surrounding countryside stretched far beyond, dotted with fields, streams, and patches of woodland. Michael leaned against the stone railing, binoculars in hand. "From up here, you can really see the planning that went into medieval towns," he said. "Defensive walls, strategic gates, and the arrangement of streets for trade and security. It's engineering, art, and history all in one." Sarah crouched beside him, sketching quickly. "It's mesmerizing," she said. "The town feels alive from up here, every corner buzzing with stories, both old and new." Thomas wandered along the parapet, peering over the walls. "I love imagining the people who once walked these stones," he said. "Soldiers, merchants, children, all part of the same place we're enjoying now, centuries later." Emily stood quietly, notebook closed, simply taking in the scene. "It's humbling," she whispered, "to realize how much time has passed and how much has been preserved. We're connected to it now, even if only for a brief moment." As the sun began its descent, casting a warm glow over the town and festival below, the four friends lingered atop the walls, savoring the view and the sense of continuity that history provided. The sounds of music, laughter, and conversation floated up to them, blending with the soft rustle of the wind through the trees surrounding the town. Michael finally broke the silence. "Tomorrow, we'll visit the nearby castle ruins and explore the surrounding countryside," he said. "But tonight, let's enjoy this view, the festival, and the fact that we're here together, experiencing it all." Sarah smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Agreed. There's something magical about being part of a story that started centuries ago and continues through us." Thomas grinned, "And maybe a little mischievous too. We're living history in our own way, making memories that will last a lifetime." Emily laughed softly, the wind carrying her words across the stone walls. "Exactly. And these moments, these experiences, they're ours now, just as the past was theirs. It's the perfect balance between learning and living." As the friends descended from the town walls, the festival lights began to glow more brightly in the growing dusk. Lanterns flickered along the streets, performers continued their acts, and the town itself seemed to hum with life and history intertwined. Walking back through the cobbled streets, the friends shared quiet conversation, each reflecting on the day, savoring the sights, sounds, and sensations of a medieval world brought vividly to life. The morning mist clung to the hills as the four friends Michael, Sarah, Thomas, and Emily prepared for another day of exploration. Today's goal was the ancient castle ruins perched atop a steep hill overlooking the valley below. The sun had just begun to illuminate the countryside, casting a golden glow across patchwork fields and winding rivers. Birds called from the trees, their songs echoing through the crisp air, while the faint sound of bells from distant villages added a timeless rhythm to the morning. Michael adjusted his backpack and checked the map one last time. "The castle is supposed to be a bit of a climb," he said, pointing to a faint trail winding through the hills. "But it's worth it. The views alone will be spectacular, and the ruins are among the best preserved in the region." Sarah tightened her scarf and took a deep breath. "I hope the climb isn't too steep. Yesterday was amazing, but my legs are still recovering from the town walls." Thomas laughed, slinging his satchel over his shoulder. "Come on, Sarah. It's just a hill. Think of it as medieval training knights had to climb steep terrain regularly. We're just getting a taste of their endurance." Emily smiled, stepping onto the trail. "And the climb will make the view from the top even more rewarding. I can already imagine the panorama, the ruins framed against the valley below." The path began gently, lined with wildflowers and hedgerows, but soon steepened as it wound upward. The friends moved carefully over uneven stones and exposed roots, pausing occasionally to catch their breath and take in the scenery. Michael led the way, pointing out patches of old stone that hinted at walls or terraces from long-forgotten structures. These traces suggest the castle's outer defenses extended farther than the ruins indicate. He explained, "People forget that castles weren't just one building, they were entire complexes with walls, towers, and courtyards, all designed for protection and visibility." Sarah stopped to admire a distant village, its thatched roofs glinting in the morning sun. It's incredible how much has changed and how much remains the same, she said. You can imagine people walking these hills hundreds of years ago, looking down at the same villages we see today. Thomas's eyes sparkled with excitement. I can't wait to get up there, he said. Every ruin has a story, and this one, I feel like it'll be full of secrets waiting to be discovered. Emily paused beside a small stream that trickled down the hillside, dipping her hand into the cool water. Even the landscape feels alive with history, she said. The valleys, the rivers, the forests, they all shaped the lives of the people who lived here. Walking through it, you almost feel their presence. After an hour of steady climbing, the castle ruins emerged through the mist. Though partially collapsed, the stone walls and towers retained a commanding presence. Standing proudly against the sky, ivy and moss clung to the ancient masonry, and small trees had taken root in some of the courtyards, creating a unique blend of nature and history. Michael led the group through the main entrance, carefully stepping over fallen stones. This castle would have been a fortress, he said, strategically placed, difficult to attack, and designed to dominate the surrounding land. It's not just a building, it's a statement of power and protection. Sarah wandered through the courtyard, tracing her fingers along the cold stone walls. It's amazing to think about the lives lived here, she said. Knights, soldiers, servants, even children. Every stone carries echoes of their footsteps. Thomas explored a partially collapsed tower, peering through narrow arrow slits that offered panoramic views of the surrounding countryside. Look at this, he called out. From here, you could see anyone approaching from miles away. They really thought of everything when they built this. Emily knelt beside a weathered carving on a wall, gently brushing away moss. Even the small details matter, she said. Carvings, inscriptions, marks left by people, these are personal stories frozen in time. It's humbling to witness. The friends moved carefully through the ruins, climbing narrow staircases and crossing fallen beams, each step revealing more of the castle's history. They speculated about battles that may have been fought, feasts that may have been held, and the daily routines of those who once called this fortress home. Michael paused at what remained of a grand hall, imagining long tables filled with feasting nobles and flickering candlelight. I can almost hear the clatter of plates and the laughter, he said. Even the cold stones seemed to remember the warmth of human life. Sarah wandered to a small chapel within the castle grounds, where sunlight filtered through a partially intact stained glass window. It's beautiful, she whispered. Even in ruins, it feels sacred, a place where people sought comfort, guidance, and reflection. Thomas found a small storage room with remnants of clay jars and iron tools. These were the practical side of life, he said. Food, supplies, and tools that kept the castle running. History isn't just battles and kings. It's everyday life, survival, and ingenuity. Emily traced her fingers along the wall of a collapsed tower. And it's these details that make history real, she said softly. Not just the grandeur, but the small, human elements that remind us people lived, laughed, struggled, and dreamed here just like we do now. By early afternoon, the friends reached the highest tower that was still accessible. From this vantage point, the valley stretched endlessly, dotted with villages, fields, and forests. The wind was stronger here, whipping through their hair and carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and distant farmland. Michael lifted his binoculars, scanning the horizon. "This view is incredible," he said. "You can see how the castle controlled the surrounding land, monitored travel routes, and protected the people within its walls. It's both beautiful and strategic." Sarah leaned against the stone railing, sketching the panorama. "It's breathtaking," she said. "The land, the ruins, the sky, everything comes together in a way that feels alive, like the past is whispering to us." Thomas stood near the edge, looking down at the winding path they had taken. And to think people moved along these paths centuries ago, probably carrying messages, supplies, and their own fears and hopes. Every step has a story. Emily closed her eyes, feeling the wind on her face. "It's humbling," she whispered, "to stand here, surrounded by centuries of history, knowing that people just like us once looked out over this same view, dreamed the same dreams, and faced the same challenges of life." After spending time absorbing the view, the friends began their descent, moving carefully through the ruins. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the stone walls, and the forested hills glowed with golden light. They paused occasionally to examine small details carvings, masonry techniques, and the faint traces of gardens and courtyards that had once flourished within the castle walls. By the time they reached the base of the hill, the sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and deepening blue. The valley below was bathed in warm light, and distant villages began to glow as lights were lit for the evening. Michael looked at his companions with a satisfied smile. "Today was remarkable," he said. "Castles like this remind us how much history surrounds us, how much ingenuity and effort went into building and sustaining these places, and how we can still connect to it today." Sarah nodded, brushing dirt from her hands. "And how lucky we are to experience it firsthand. Reading about castles is one thing, but walking through the ruins, climbing the towers, and feeling the stones, it's another entirely." Thomas grinned. "And don't forget the adventure of it, the climbing, the exploring, the imagining ourselves as part of history. That's what makes it unforgettable." Emily laughed softly, looking back at the castle silhouetted against the twilight sky. "Every stone, every pathway, every view tells a story, and being here together, sharing it, makes our own story part of this place now." As the friends walked back toward their inn, the first stars appeared, twinkling above the hills. Their hearts were full of the day's experiences, their minds alive with stories of medieval life, and their spirits eager for the adventures that the next day would bring. The forested path seemed almost alive in the fading light, guiding them home, while the ruins of the castle stood as silent witnesses to the passing of centuries. Each step, each glance, each memory was a connection across time, a bridge between past and present that they carried with them as they returned to rest and prepare for another day of discovery. The morning sun broke gently over the horizon, casting a soft golden glow on the countryside. The four friends Michael, Sarah, Thomas, and Emily stood outside their inn, stretching and adjusting their gear for a day that promised both exploration and interaction with the local culture. Today, they planned to visit a small riverside village known for its medieval heritage, artisanal crafts, and historic mills. The guidebook described it as a place where time seemed to have slowed, preserving traditions and stories from centuries past. Michael unfolded the map, his finger tracing the winding roads along the river. The village is only a few miles away, but the path will take us along the riverbank, he explained. It's scenic, and there are several small bridges and watermills we can explore. According to the guidebook, some of these mills have been operational for over 400 years. Sarah smiled, adjusting her scarf against the crisp morning air. I love rivers, she said. There's something peaceful about watching the water flow, imagining the generations that have relied on it for life, work, and travel. Thomas tightened the straps of his backpack. And I want to see those watermills in action. There's something about machinery built centuries ago, still functioning with such precision and ingenuity. That fascinates me. Emily, ever the observer, smiled softly. And I'll be sketching, writing, and soaking it all in. The rhythm of the river, the movement of the mills, and the people maintaining their craft. It's all living history. The trail began gently, winding along the river's edge. The water sparkled under the morning sun, reflecting the surrounding hills and trees in shimmering patterns. Wildflowers lined the banks, and the faint hum of insects mingled with the soft rush of the current. Every now and then, a duck or heron would move through the water, adding life to the serene scene. Michael led the group carefully over small stone bridges that arched gracefully across narrow sections of the river. These bridges have been here for centuries, he said, pointing to the worn stone and subtle carvings. They were built to withstand floods and heavy loads, and they've done remarkably well. Imagine carts full of grain or wool crossing these very stones hundreds of years ago. Sarah knelt beside the riverbank, dipping her fingers into the cool water. It feels the same as it probably did back then, she murmured. The flow, the temperature, the sound, it's timeless. Thomas wandered to the first watermill, where the wheel turned steadily in the current, grinding grain into flour with a rhythmic creak and splash. Incredible, he said, watching the mechanism. Everything is so mechanical and precise, and it's all powered by the river. No electricity, no modern engines, just skill and natural energy. Emily crouched nearby, sketching the watermill and the surrounding scenery. It's a perfect example of how people lived in harmony with their environment, she said. They built structures that served a purpose, lasted centuries, and interacted seamlessly with the natural world. The friends spent the morning exploring the village, stopping at various mills and workshops. A blacksmith demonstrated forging techniques, showing how iron was shaped into tools, nails, and household items. Michael and Thomas watched closely, fascinated by the precision and strength required. Michael commented, even small details, like the hammer strikes and temperature control, had to be perfect. It's a lost art in many ways. Sarah explored a weaving workshop, observing artisans transforming raw wool into fabric. The patience and skill required are remarkable, she said. Every thread tells a story, every pattern is part of the culture. It's like watching history come alive in every motion. Emily found a quiet corner near the river, recording observations in her notebook. The people here aren't just preserving history for tourists, she noted. They're living it, practicing it daily, connecting past and present in a tangible way. It's inspiring. By midday, the group gathered near the central square of the village, where locals were preparing for a small festival celebrating harvest traditions. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze, and the aroma of fresh bread and roasted meats filled the air. Children ran between stalls, laughing, some dressed in simple tunics reminiscent of medieval attire. Michael guided the friends to a demonstration of traditional bread making. The baker explained the process, from kneading the dough to using a stone oven heated by firewood. Sarah eagerly joined in, rolling dough under the baker's guidance, while Thomas and Michael observed, fascinated by the techniques. Emily sketched the scene, capturing the movements, expressions, and textures with meticulous care. After tasting the freshly baked bread, the friends wandered to a small square where musicians played lutes and flutes. The melodies were simple yet haunting, evoking images of medieval feasts and village gatherings. People clapped and danced, some joining spontaneously in the cheerful rhythm. Michael turned to his companions. "This is exactly what I hoped for today," he said. "Not just seeing artifacts or ruins, but experiencing the culture, the craft, the music, the heartbeat of a community preserved across centuries." Sarah nodded, smiling. "It feels alive. Every sound, every smell, every interaction connects us to the past in a way that books or museums never could." Thomas wandered to a small demonstration of archery, where visitors were encouraged to try traditional bows. "I can't resist," he muttered, joining the line. His focus was intense as he took aim, drawing the bow and releasing arrows at wooden targets. The instructors offered guidance, and Thomas's skill grew with each attempt. Michael and Sarah cheered, while Emily quietly noted his technique and enthusiasm in her journal. By mid-afternoon, the friends walked along the riverbank again, heading toward a historic bridge that led to the outskirts of the village. The sun was higher now, casting sparkling reflections on the water. Ducks paddled lazily, and the gentle ripple of the river provided a soothing soundtrack. Michael paused to point out a cluster of stone cottages. "These homes have been here for centuries," he said. "Families lived, worked, and celebrated life within these walls, connecting generations to the land and the river. It's incredible to think how much history these simple buildings hold." Sarah crouched to examine a patch of wildflowers along the path. "Even nature here seems untouched," she said. "The combination of human history and the surrounding environment creates something timeless, something that feels eternal." Thomas laughed, pointing to a small weir along the river. "Look at that. Even the water management techniques are centuries old. Ingenious, practical, and still functional." Emily walked quietly beside him, taking in the view. "It's the details that matter," she said softly. "Every stone, every wheel, every flower, every ripple in the water, all of it tells a story of people who lived, worked, and dreamed here long before us." By late afternoon, the friends reached a vantage point overlooking the village. From here, the river wound like a silver ribbon through the countryside, flanked by fields, cottages, and patches of forest. The mill's wheels turned steadily, the sunlight glinting off the water, creating a scene that felt suspended between past and present. Michael leaned against a stone railing, binoculars in hand. "This view ties everything together," he said. "The mills, the cottages, the river, the people, it's a living tapestry of history, preserved and thriving." Sarah sketched quickly in her notebook, capturing the colors, the movement, and the interplay of light and shadow. "I want to remember this forever," she said. "Not just the sights, but the feeling, the sense of connection to centuries of life along this river." Thomas wandered to the edge, looking down at the village, and to think, every step we took today, every interaction we had, is part of a long chain of experiences in this place. We're just the latest link. Emily smiled, closing her notebook. "And yet, we leave a trace to memories, observations, stories to carry forward. History isn't just behind us, it's something we continue to live and add to." As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting warm golden light across the village and river, the four friends lingered at the vantage point, savoring the serene beauty and deep sense of history surrounding them. The mills turned, the river flowed, and life in the village continued, a testament to resilience, tradition, and the enduring connection between past and present. Eventually, they began the walk back toward their inn, the day's experiences settling into a quiet, reflective rhythm. Conversation was soft, filled with observations, laughter, and the occasional shared silence as they absorbed the richness of the day. The river's gentle murmur accompanied them, guiding them home and reinforcing the sense of connection that had been established through exploration, curiosity, and shared wonder. The early morning fog clung lightly to the fields as the four friends Michael, Sarah, Thomas, and Emily prepared for another day of exploration. Today's adventure took them to a nearby medieval abbey, a place that had once been a center of faith, learning, and daily life for hundreds of monks. The guidebook described it as partially preserved, but remarkably evocative, with cloisters, refectories, and gardens that offered a direct connection to the past. Michael adjusted his backpack, checking the route on the map one last time. "The abbey isn't far from here," he said, "but the terrain is uneven in places, and some sections of the ruins are delicate. We'll need to be careful, but the reward will be worth it." Sarah tied her boots firmly, a hint of excitement in her eyes. "I love abbeys," she said. "There's something about them quiet, mysterious, and filled with centuries of devotion. I can't wait to see it." Thomas grinned. "And I want to explore every nook and cranny. Stone walls, hidden passages, maybe even a bell tower or two. You never know what you'll find." Emily checked her notebook and sketching supplies. "And I'll be capturing everything: architecture, gardens, inscriptions, and even the play of light and shadow. Abbeys are full of small details that tell enormous stories." The path to the abbey wound through rolling hills and patches of woodland. Morning dew glistened on the grass, and the air was filled with the soft calls of birds. The river they had followed the day before appeared briefly, a sparkling ribbon in the distance, reflecting the early sunlight dot as they approached the abbey. Its silhouette emerged through the mist. Though partially ruined, the stone walls, arched windows, and towering remnants of the main structure conveyed a powerful sense of presence. Ivy climbed the walls, and wildflowers sprouted in the courtyards, adding color to the weathered gray stones. Michael led the group through the entrance, carefully stepping over broken stones and uneven ground. "The abbey was built in the 13th century, he said. "It was not just a religious site, it was a center of education, agriculture, and community life. Monks here would have studied manuscripts, tended gardens, brewed beer, and provided guidance to the surrounding villagers." Sarah moved slowly through the nave, tracing her fingers along the cold, rough stone. "It's awe-inspiring," she whispered. "Even in ruins, you can feel the devotion and dedication of everyone who lived and worked here." Thomas wandered toward the cloisters, marveling at the symmetry and craftsmanship of the arches. "Look at this," he said. "Every stone fits perfectly. You can imagine monks walking these paths, chanting, studying, or just reflecting in silence. It's like the walls themselves hold the rhythm of their lives." Emily crouched near a set of faded inscriptions on a stone pillar. "These are fascinating," she said softly. "Even centuries later, you can see names, dates, and symbols etched by hands that were alive long ago. They left a mark that connects us to their world." The friends moved through the abbey, exploring the gardens, refectory, and remaining living quarters. Michael paused near a partially preserved scriptorium. "This is where manuscripts were copied," he explained. "Every page meticulously written, illuminated, and preserved. Imagine the patience, skill, and care it required. These were treasures of knowledge and art." Sarah knelt near a small herb garden, inhaling the fragrance of thyme, rosemary, and lavender. "Even the gardens are historical," she said. "They were practical and symbolic, used for cooking, medicine, and spiritual rituals. Every plant has meaning and purpose." Thomas climbed carefully to a remaining section of the bell tower, peering out over the countryside. "From up here, you can see why abbeys were built where they were," he said. "You could monitor the land, the village, and even travelers passing through, strategic and spiritual, all in one." Emily sketched rapidly, capturing the interplay of light through the remaining stained glass windows, and the delicate textures of moss and ivy on the walls. "Abbeys are living lessons," she said. "Every detail, every shadow, every line tells a story that books alone can't convey." By mid-morning, they gathered in the courtyard, where sunlight had fully broken through the mist, casting warm light on the stone walls and flowering plants. A few visitors wandered quietly, respecting the solemnity and history of the place. Michael consulted the map. "After the abbey, we can walk along a trail that leads to the old village cemetery. It's small, but has gravestones dating back to the medieval period. They're simple, yet full of stories if you take the time to read them." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I like that idea," she said. "It's a quieter way to reflect on the lives of ordinary people, not just the monks or nobility." Thomas stretched and grinned. "And maybe we'll find a few hidden carvings or symbols. I love discovering things that aren't in guidebooks." Emily smiled, closing her notebook. "Every step of this journey adds depth. We're not just observing history, we're walking through it, experiencing it in real, tangible ways." The friends left the abbey, following a narrow dirt path through fields dotted with grazing sheep. The cemetery appeared suddenly, a quiet clearing shaded by ancient trees. Gravestones of varying sizes and shapes stood in neat rows, some weathered almost beyond recognition, others surprisingly intact. Moss and lichen covered many of the stones, softening their edges and adding color to the gray stone. Michael moved carefully between the gravestones, pointing out inscriptions that were still legible. "Some of these date back to the 14th century, he said. "Simple markers, but they tell a story, names, dates, sometimes an occupation or a note about the person's life." Sarah knelt to examine a gravestone partially covered in moss. "It's humbling," she said softly. These were people who lived their lives, experienced joys and sorrows, and now time has carried them into history. Yet, here we are, reading their stories centuries later. Thomas crouched near a weathered stone carved with a simple cross. Even the symbols are meaningful, he said. They reflect faith, hope, and sometimes personal identity. You don't need a detailed history to understand that life mattered to them. Emily moved slowly through the cemetery, sketching the gravestones and noting inscriptions in her journal. Every detail is a connection, she said quietly. Names, dates, symbols, and even the placement of the stones, all of it contributes to a tapestry of memory, allowing us to step into their world. After spending time quietly reflecting and exploring the cemetery, the friends continued along the trail, returning to the riverside path they had followed the previous day. The air was filled with the soft sounds of nature, birds calling, leaves rustling, and the distant murmur of the river. It was a serene conclusion to a morning steeped in history and reflection that by late afternoon, the friends returned to their inn, the sun beginning to dip toward the horizon. The experience of the abbey and cemetery had left them thoughtful, their minds rich with stories of devotion, daily life, and human connection across centuries. Michael stretched, looking toward the hills beyond. Tomorrow, he said, we head into the forest to explore an old trade route and possibly encounter some of the medieval markers that guided travelers. It's going to be another day full of discovery. Sarah smiled, brushing her hair from her face. I can't wait. Every day here feels like stepping further back in time, and I love it. Thomas grinned. And who knows what hidden treasures we'll find. The past is full of surprises. Emily laughed softly. And we'll record every moment, every detail, and every story. By the end of this journey, we'll have our own medieval chronicle. As evening settled over the countryside, the four friends sat quietly on the inn's terrace, watching the fading light and sharing soft conversation. The abbey and cemetery had been a profound reminder of lives lived centuries ago, and the sense of connection they felt with history deepened, preparing them for the adventures that lay ahead. The morning sun rose softly over the rolling hills, illuminating the forest path that Michael, Sarah, Thomas, and Emily had chosen for their final day of exploration. Today's journey was different. It was quieter, reflective, a path meant not just for discovery, but for tying together all the experiences they had shared. Over the past days, they would follow an old trade route that connected villages, forests, and ruins. Walking in the footsteps of travelers from centuries ago, Michael checked the map carefully. This route is ancient, he said. Merchants, pilgrims, and villagers walked it for generations. Some markers still survive, hidden in the forest. If we follow them, we can imagine the rhythms of their daily lives. Sarah smiled, adjusting her scarf. It feels fitting to end our journey walking this path. It's peaceful and historical, and it reminds us that the past isn't just in castles or abbey's, it's in the trails, the rivers, and the land itself. Thomas hoisted his backpack with a grin. And who knows, maybe we'll stumble upon some forgotten corner, a hidden stone, or even remnants of a small medieval resting place. That's the thrill of discovery. Emily walked beside him, her notebook open and pen ready. I want to capture every detail, the way sunlight filters through the leaves, the sound of the river nearby, the faint markings on stones. These moments are as much a part of history as any ruin we visited. The forest welcomed them with a soft hush. Sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, creating moving patterns on the ground. The gentle rustle of leaves and the occasional call of a bird created a serene soundtrack to their journey. Every step felt like stepping further into the past, connecting them to the countless travelers who had walked this same path long before. Michael pointed out a faint carving on a tree trunk. "Look at this," he said. "It's a trail marker, probably used by merchants or pilgrims." It's amazing how these small signs guided people through forests, hills, and villages for centuries. Sarah crouched to examine the undergrowth, noticing wildflowers and herbs that seemed untouched by modern life. "Even nature feels historic here," she said. "It's like the forest itself remembers all the footsteps, stories, and lives that passed through." Thomas wandered to a small clearing where a sunbeam illuminated a moss-covered stone. "This might have been a resting place," he mused, "or a boundary marker. Either way, it's another piece of history tucked away, waiting to be discovered." Emily sketched the scene quickly, capturing the interplay of light, shadow, and texture. "I love how everything tells a story," she said softly. "Not just buildings or monuments, but the land itself, the trails, the rivers, even the stones we pass by." As they continued along the trail, the forest began to open into a gentle valley. The river from the previous days wound gracefully through the fields, and distant villages glimmered in the morning light. The sense of continuity was overwhelming. Rivers, forests, villages, castles, abbeys, and mills all connected, forming a tapestry of history that spanned centuries. Michael stopped on a hillock, looking out over the valley. "This is what I love most about traveling this way," he said. "You see how everything is interconnected: the paths, the settlements, the landscapes. History isn't isolated, it's everywhere, flowing like this river." Sarah leaned on a tree, smiling at the view. "It's humbling," she said, "to realize that people lived, worked, and dreamed here just like we do. And now, for a brief moment, we're part of that continuum." Thomas knelt to examine a cluster of stones, noting faint engravings that suggested they were old waymarkers. "Every detail matters," he said. "These stones guided travelers, just as the land guides us now. We're walking a path shaped by generations." Emily stood quietly, observing the interplay of light across the valley. "And this is how stories live on," she said softly. "Not just in books or ruins, but in the land itself, in the trails we walk, and in the experiences we carry forward." They followed the river to a small, picturesque village where a festival was taking place, celebrating the harvest and local traditions. Villagers in historic costumes greeted them warmly, and children ran along cobblestone streets, laughing and playing. The friends wandered through the festivities, savoring the smells of freshly baked bread, roasting meats, and sweet pastries. Music from lutes and flutes filled the air, blending with the sound of laughter and conversation. Michael led the group to a small bridge overlooking the river. "Let's pause here," he suggested. "This is a perfect spot to reflect on our journey: forests, castles, abbeys, villages, rivers, and people. It's all connected." Sarah leaned against the railing, gazing at the flowing water. "Every day has added a layer to our experience," she said. From ruins to festivals, every step has been a lesson in history, culture, and humanity. Thomas grinned, pointing at a nearby mill turning steadily in the current. And we've done more than see history, we've lived it, touched it, and connected with it. That's something I'll never forget. Emily opened her notebook, jotting down final observations and sketches. The journey is ending, she said softly, but the memories, the insights, and the stories we've experienced will stay with us forever. This isn't just travel, it's a living connection to the past. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the village and river. Lanterns began to glow, illuminating the streets and cottages. While the gentle hum of evening life filled the air, the friends stood together on the bridge, sharing quiet conversation, laughter, and reflective silence. Michael finally broke the quiet. It's hard to believe this journey is ending, he said. But what matters is that we've seen history in every form: ruins, landscapes, rivers, villages, and festivals. We've walked in the footsteps of countless people and carried their stories with us. Sarah nodded, a soft smile on her face. And we'll carry them forward, sharing them, remembering them, and adding our own experiences to the tapestry. Thomas leaned against the railing, watching the river flow. It's like the river, he said. Time flows. People come and go, but the stories remain, shaping the land and our own journey through it. Emily looked at her friends, the village, the river, and the distant hills. This is the perfect ending, she said. Not a conclusion, but a continuation. Our journey through medieval England may be ending, but the memories, lessons, and connections will remain, flowing with us into the future. As the sun set completely, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, the four friends stood together, watching the world around them. The river reflected the fading light, the village hummed softly with life, and the hills stretched endlessly beyond. The journey had been rich, immersive, and transformative. They had explored ruins, forests, abbeys, castles, and villages. They had touched history, tasted its flavors, heard its music, and felt its presence. And as they walked back toward their inn for the final time, the friends carried with them not just souvenirs or photographs, but a deep, enduring connection to the past, a connection that would live on in their hearts and stories forever. The journey ended here, but the echoes of medieval England would continue, flowing like the river, in their memories and in the stories they would share for years to come.